Ellie Price sat perfectly still, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound filling her small home. The evening sun painted tired lines across her worn armchair, the same one she bought decades ago when her boy, Jackson, turned 7. Back then, it had been a symbol of pride. Now it felt like a monument to something lost. On the table, her phone screen shone like an accusation. Available balance, $0. She blinked once, twice, then again. Her pulse slowed. It wasn't disbelief. It was the kind of quiet that comes when the world tilts and you have no strength to fight gravity. Ellie called the bank, her voice calm though her heart thudded painfully. A robotic voice answered first, then a real person. They explained in a tone too casual for what it meant that her savings, over $80,000, had been transferred online. And to whom? She asked softly. To an account registered under Jackson Arthur Price, the representative replied. Would you like to report this as unauthorized activity? She didn't answer. She ended the call. The silence afterward was deafening. Even the ticking clock in her kitchen felt cruel. Then her old landline rang. Ellie, have you seen Jackson's pictures? Chirped her neighbor Doris. He's in Rome, dear. Fancy dinners, his wife, her mother. Looks like they're having the time of their lives. Ellie's hand trembled as she searched her son's profile. There he was, smiling before ancient ruins, a glass raised high. Rome, my new beginning, the caption read. Tanya, his wife, had commented beneath, thanks for everything, mama-in-law, with a little emoji that stung more than words ever could. Ellie didn't cry. She didn't even frown. She simply stared, her face expressionless until a small, quiet smile formed. Not of joy, not even anger, just understanding. That night in Rome, Jackson laughed beside Tanya and her mother Rhonda. She'll be fine, Tanya said with a shrug. Better we enjoy it than let it vanish into bills. Rhonda chuckled. That woman never knew how to live. Jackson looked away, the wine suddenly bitter on his tongue. Back home, Ellie walked through her living room, a museum of memories. Photos lined every shelf. Jackson's first day at school, his graduation, his wedding day. Every frame whispered what she had given up for him, her youth, her savings, her hope. Later, she sat with Doris over coffee. Don't lose heart, Ellie, Doris said kindly. He'll come around. Ellie's gaze was distant. Maybe, she murmured. But sometimes regret comes too late. She smiled again, slow, deliberate. When a woman has nothing left to lose, she learns to wait. And somewhere across the ocean, Jackson's phone buzzed. His bank account. Access restricted due to suspicious activity. He frowned, unaware that his mother, miles away, had already begun to move in silence. Because sometimes, the quiet doesn't mean surrender. It means the beginning of something unstoppable. But this time, Ellie didn't feel tired. Something new was awakening inside her, not anger, not grief, but a strength she'd never known before. As the kettle heated on the stove, she watched the blue flame dance, and the faint whistle carried her back in time to the day she first understood what it meant to be alone. She had been only 14 when she began cleaning houses in the Brentwood district, a girl with uneven braids, dark hands warm from soap, and eyes that had seen too much for her age. By then, she already knew every brand of floor polish and how to fold linen so smooth it looked untouched. When she returned home at night, her mother was usually asleep, too tired to speak. Her father had long since left, chasing a different life with someone from a roadside bar. Ellie never cried. She simply rose again before dawn and went back to work. At 17, life took another turn. She found out she was expecting. The father, a boy barely older than her, promised a home and a future. For 8 months, she believed him. Then, the day he learned the baby would be a boy, he was gone. He left quietly and never came back. Ellie didn't collapse. She tied her scarf, steadied her heart, and carried on. She raised Jackson by herself, washing clothes and scrubbing floors with him strapped to her back. When he grew, she made toy cars from detergent caps. And when he was hungry, she turned a bowl of soup into a feast with a story. They had little, but what they had was love. When Jackson turned 6, one of Ellie's employers offered to pay for his schooling if she worked full-time and lived on their property. She agreed without hesitation. Every weekend, she traveled across the city just to see her son, never arriving empty-handed, maybe a notebook, maybe a snack, but always a smile. Time passed. Jackson grew. Ellie taught herself to read enough to fill out his school forms, trembling as she practiced her signature. At 16, Jackson promised her, "One day I'll buy you a warm house, Mama." She replied softly, "Just don't forget me, son." Years later, college came, and so did sacrifice. Ellie sold the small piece of land her father had left her in Georgia. That land had been her dream, but she traded it so her son could have his. "He's going to be somebody," she told everyone proudly. And he was, just not in the way she hoped. In his third year, Jackson met Tanya. From the first handshake, Ellie felt uneasy. Tanya had that gleam of someone who always took more than she gave. Her mother, Rhonda, mirrored her, dressing in imitation luxury and speaking with airs that didn't belong. When they first visited Ellie's home, Rhonda smiled politely. "Such an interesting color on your walls," she said. Tanya whispered under her breath, "I can't believe Jackson grew up here." Ellie smiled anyway, though something inside her quietly cracked. Time chipped away at what was left. Tanya slowly erased Ellie's place in their lives. First fewer visits, then fewer invitations. Jackson, caught in love and confusion, drifted further each day. One evening, he stopped by for dinner, her roast and gravy, his favorite, but his words cut deeper than silence. "Tanya says you hold us back, Mom. I don't need you to take care of me anymore." Ellie only nodded, cleared the plates, and packed him leftovers. After that, Tanya began handling Jackson's finances, changing accounts, and keeping secrets. Ellie noticed odd receipts and missing statements. Uneasy, she went to see Walter, her childhood friend, now an old lawyer surrounded by dusty files and quiet wisdom. "Walter," she asked, "how can I tell if someone's using my name?" He studied her, took her papers, and after weeks of digging, called her back. "Ellie, your signature was copied. You've been attached to an account you never approved. They've been taking your savings for months." Ellie said nothing. She took the documents, thanked him, and walked home. That night, her tears never came, only a deep, hollow calm. Her son hadn't just been misled. He had chosen to betray her. Soon after, Tanya planned the Rome trip, convincing Jackson to use his mother's funds. "It's family money," she said lightly. "You're not taking it, just borrowing it early." And Jackson, tired and eager to please, gave in. That night, with one click, he moved every dollar. Ellie found out the next morning. She didn't weep. She wrote one quiet line in her notebook. "My son still lives, but the mother in me is gone." From that day, her walk grew steadier, her eyes colder. In Rome, Jackson thought he had won. But in Los Angeles, Ellie had begun weaving something far stronger than revenge, a plan built from silence. Because Ellie was no longer the woman they remembered. That woman was gone, and in her place stood something new, unbreakable. In her place remained a wounded mother, but one wide awake. And when a wounded mother opens her eyes, there is no fire she won't walk through. The pain of betrayal had faded. What lingered was something heavier, the realization that she had been unseen, taken for granted, and erased from her own story. But Ellie Price refused to vanish quietly. She understood now. The silence of a mother can be powerful enough to change everything. She spoke less. Not that day, not the next, nor the one after. But her quiet was no longer soft. It was focused, deliberate, the kind that listens, remembers, and plans. Words no longer mattered. Observation did. Because once a mother realizes she's been replaced by a lie, she doesn't weep, she evolves. Jackson didn't notice the change. Or maybe he didn't want to. He was lost in the life he had once dreamed of, a life that didn't smell like morning coffee or home-cooked meals, a life where no one called him my boy, only sir. Tanya ruled that life with grace and control, moving through it like she owned it. Jackson, enchanted, watched her every gesture, the way she spoke with confidence, the way she made everything seem like it was hers. But beneath her charm was something precise and cold. Tanya had goals. A name, a fortune, a life built fast, and she would reach them no matter who stood in the way. The first remarks came disguised as playful words. "Honey, why does your mother always have to comment on everything?" she'd say while painting her nails. I don't want our child growing up around small-minded thinking. Jackson would laugh weakly, trying to defend his mother. She doesn't mean to interfere, Tanya. But Tanya smiled thinly. It's not interference. It's pity in disguise. Women like her think struggle gives them a crown. Little by little, Tanya started controlling when they visited Ellie, first claiming busy schedules, then preferring public places, and finally avoiding her house entirely. It smells old, she whispered once. Jackson, unsure how to answer, simply nodded. Ellie noticed every distance widening, every unanswered call, every postponed visit. Her heart didn't break anymore, it hardened. Piece by piece, she started sewing the truth together, like someone mending a torn cloth with steady hands. Rhonda, Tanya's mother, joined in too, never rude, but always sharp. Miss Eleanor, she'd say sweetly, have you ever thought about moving to a better neighborhood? It's not safe here, especially at your age. With your savings, you could buy something nicer. Ellie met her eyes, calm but fierce. That day, she finally understood. They didn't just want her gone. They had never wanted her near. One Sunday, at a family lunch hosted by Tanya, Ellie finally spoke. When the moment was right, she looked at Jackson and asked gently, Son, are you sure this woman is right for you? Have you seen how she looks at you when you're not looking? The air turned cold. Tanya raised her eyes from her phone. Rhonda stepped out from the hallway. Jackson's patience snapped. That's enough, Mom. You're just jealous because someone else matters to me now. Ellie didn't argue. She lowered her eyes to her plate, placed her fork down, and knew she had lost him. When she returned home, the silence felt heavier than ever. She took off her shoes quietly, as if not to disturb the walls. Sitting on her bed, she tried to remember the last time her son had said, I love you on his own. She couldn't. Days turned into weeks. Tanya and Rhonda hovered over Jackson like shadows, bringing him lunch, advising him about money, convincing him to let Tanya manage his accounts. Trust me, she said softly. And as always, he did. But Ellie didn't stop moving. She turned to her neighbor, Brenda, a retired accountant known for her sharp mind. Brenda, Ellie asked one afternoon, how can I tell if someone is changing things in my bank? Brenda looked concerned. Your son? Ellie nodded slowly. Night after night, Brenda sat beside her, teaching her how to open her online records, how to read statements, how to trace the numbers. The first time Ellie saw the list of transfers, her stomach turned. The dates matched her son's visits. The amounts were large, and every entry carried his name. Ellie, Brenda whispered, this isn't a mistake. Someone's taking your money. Ellie didn't cry. She just started writing every transaction, every dollar, every time. Then Brenda showed her one more thing. Look here. That signature isn't yours. Ellie's breath caught. They didn't even try to hide it. What will you do? Brenda asked. Ellie closed her phone and smiled faintly. Not yet, she said. And across the ocean, Jackson began to sense it. Tanya was distant, colder, whispering on the phone when she thought he slept. He didn't yet know that Ellie was already setting things in motion, quietly, precisely, like a storm forming on the horizon. In Los Angeles, Ellie visited banks, printed statements, and uncovered the truth. Her son had even tried to claim her house. She left the office that day and walked to an old church, sat in the empty pews, and looked at the altar. Give me patience, she whispered, not to forgive, but to stay still long enough for the right moment to come. Silence filled the small house once more. When Ellie returned home that evening, she turned on the radio. A slow blues song echoed through the empty room as she picked up her knitting needles. But this time, she wasn't weaving clothing, she was weaving purpose. Each thread carried calculation, each loop, quiet determination. The seeds of betrayal had already been planted. Now they were beginning to bloom. And Ellie, calm and precise, knew that the harvest was near. The nights no longer weighed heavy on her. The cold no longer bit through her bones. She moved through each day as if marking chapters in a story she already knew the ending of. Every sunrise was a step closer, not to revenge, but to resolution. She counted the days with the patience of someone sharpening a blade that would only be drawn once. One morning, while sweeping beneath her old armchair, she noticed a small plastic bag tucked under the cushion. Inside was a wrinkled, torn envelope and a folded paper. She almost threw it away until instinct stopped her hand. Slowly, she opened it. Her eyes moved over the printed words. Her full name, her address, her supposed signature. At the top, in bold letters, last will and testament. Her pulse slowed. She read it again and again, each line confirming what her heart already feared. It stated that she had left her house and all her savings to her son, as if she had written it herself, but she hadn't. The signature wasn't hers. It was a forgery. The silence of the house deepened, almost echoing. Not a single tear came. Not shock, just confirmation. She called Walter. "Come over," she said simply. 2 hours later, Walter sat at her kitchen table, the paper spread before him. He read in silence, then exhaled sharply. "Ellie, this isn't just dishonest. It's dangerous. If this had been filed, you could have lost everything." Ellie stared at her hands, aged, calloused, but steady. "He wanted to erase me," she whispered. Walter didn't respond. He knew this wasn't the time for comfort. After a long pause, he asked, "What will you do now?" Ellie smiled faintly. "I'll make sure he understands what it means to take what isn't his." A few days later, her phone rang. It was Dr. Evans from the clinic. "Miss Eleanor, I need you to come in today. It's important." She went without fear, wearing her usual scarf and carrying her small notebook of medicines. The doctor's face told her everything before he spoke. "Your test results, they're not good," he said gently. "It's a serious illness, and it's advanced. You may have only a few months." Ellie didn't flinch. She looked at the damp patch on the wall, shaped like a bird, and whispered, "Then I'll use those months well." The doctor offered treatment options, but Ellie shook her head. "I won't spend what's left tied to a hospital bed. There's still work I need to do." As she walked home, she felt no fear. Each street she crossed reminded her of what she had lived for, her son, her sacrifices, her long days of struggle. At home, she took out a wooden box from under her bed, filled with notes, clippings, and the only photo of Jackson as a child, asleep against her arm. She gazed at it for a long time, then whispered, "No more prayers. It's time to act." The next day, with Walter's help, she filed a report, not as a grieving mother, but as a citizen demanding fairness. They presented evidence of forged documents and requested a freeze on the bank accounts. It took effort, but Walter knew the right procedures. "Are you sure you're ready for what's ahead?" he asked. Ellie nodded. "I've been preparing all my life. I just didn't know it." That night, she bought a red notebook and began to write her story. On the first page, she wrote, "To my son Jackson, I gave you everything I had, love, time, and life itself. This is not revenge. This is truth, and truth is the only thing I'll leave behind." Meanwhile, across the ocean, Jackson and Tanya continued their show of happiness, photos, videos, endless smiles. But beneath it all, cracks were forming. Tanya's laughter had grown distant, Rhonda's tone colder, and Jackson felt unease creeping in. One evening, while checking his email, he stumbled upon a folder he'd never noticed. Inside were messages not meant for his eyes. "Tanya, we almost have everything. He doesn't suspect a thing. Contact. What if he finds out? Tanya, let him. I'm done pretending." Jackson's chest tightened. He sat in silence, guilt and realization washing over him. For the first time in years, he thought of his mother, her voice, her warmth, her quiet strength. He wanted to call her, but he didn't. And Ellie, she no longer waited for calls. Her patience had turned into strategy. Her silence had become a plan. Ellie had done it. Quietly, carefully, without shouting or bitterness, she had moved every piece of the board until the game changed. She had declared Jackson's transaction suspicious, and the system had responded. It was slow, yes, but it worked. An international alert was issued for his return to the United States. He wouldn't be locked away, but he would have to face what he had done. In her red notebook, Ellie wrote, "True justice doesn't need noise. It doesn't seek revenge. It waits, it observes, and it acts when the world least expects it." From that moment, the pain no longer weakened her, it shaped her. The hurt turned into focus, and the mother inside her made room for a woman who finally saw herself clearly. Across the ocean, Jackson had no idea what awaited him. He thought hardship was something fiery and loud. He didn't know it could be cold, quiet, and public. It began simply a decline card in a crowded cafe, then another at a hotel counter. Within 2 days, every account he owned had been frozen. His name was linked to an ongoing financial investigation, and his world began to fall apart. Tanya's voice filled the street outside the restaurant, sharp and furious. You've ruined everything. You and your foolish trust in your mother's pity. Now look at us. People turned to stare. Jackson tried to respond, but no explanation could fix the storm he had created. That night, Rhonda packed her things first. I warned you, she said coldly. I won't spend another minute in this mess. Tanya followed without a word. Jackson was left in a half-empty room with silence as his only company. Back in Los Angeles, Ellie continued weaving the last threads of her plan. Walter helped her gather every document, records, statements, official complaints. Together, they activated the Elder Financial Protection Clause, freezing any assets under dispute. Walter even contacted an old acquaintance at the IRS investigations office, who made sure an alert was ready the moment Jackson's passport was scanned at customs. Ellie wasn't acting out of hatred. It was principle. She wrote again in her notebook. Sometimes a mother's love must take a different shape. What is left uncorrected grows wild. What grows wild destroys. I raised a boy, not a stranger, and if I must stop him so he can see himself again, then I will. Brenda, always by her side, asked quietly, Doesn't it hurt, Ellie? Ellie smiled faintly. Of course it does. But some pain teaches us how to heal. When Jackson was summoned to the embassy, the scene was heavy with silence. A lawyer, a translator, a stack of documents. They explained the investigation, the frozen funds, the order waiting for him back home. He walked out, pale and trembling, realizing everything was slipping away, his freedom, his comfort, his illusions. He thought of his mother then, her hands, her voice, her patience. For the first time in years, he truly missed her. So he called. Mom, he said, voice shaking. Ellie was rinsing black-eyed peas in her kitchen when she heard his voice. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't drop the phone. Mom, please. They froze my accounts. I'm alone. They say you did this. Ellie took a deep breath. I didn't take anything from you, Jackson. I only stopped you from taking more from me. They want to question me. You said you'd always be there for me. I was, she answered gently, until you stopped being there for yourself. Please help me, he whispered. Learn, she said simply, and she hung up. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she wrote him a letter, her last one, not to forgive, but to explain. My dear Jackson, you are my reason to wake up each morning. I gave you everything, even what I didn't have. But love without limits becomes blindness. I do not hate you. I never could. But now I must teach you the lesson life refused to. If one day you truly understand, this letter will be here. Not to save you, but so you'll know someone once believed in you enough to stop you. At the end, she drew a small heart, fragile, simple, and sincere. In Rome, Jackson wandered aimlessly. Nights were long and cold. His phone stayed silent. No one called. No one cared. When he finally booked a flight home, he knew what waited for him wasn't comfort, but consequence. Ellie's health was fading fast, yet her spirit had never been stronger. She had cut her hair short before treatment could take it from her. Looking in the mirror, she whispered, Now I look like who I've become. Walter drove her to her last appointment. The doctor confirmed what she already knew. Her time was short. Ellie nodded softly. I'm not afraid of leaving, she said. I'm only grateful that I'll leave with nothing left undone. That night, as the city slept, Ellie lay quietly in her bed. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her heart rested. She had done what she came to do, and somewhere above the ocean, a plane descended, carrying the son who would finally face what his mother had left for him. Walter had moved heaven and earth to make it happen. He pulled the strings, filed the permits, and convinced an old friend at the embassy, a man who was also the son of a single mother, to allow Ellie to be present when Jackson gave his statement. It wasn't required by law, but compassion sometimes bends the rules. When she arrived that morning, Walter stood waiting by the gate. He took off his hat respectfully. You don't look like someone who's about to face her son, he said softly. Ellie adjusted her scarf. And you don't look like a man who's retired. He smiled faintly. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm alive, she replied. That's enough. They drove in silence. Walter tried to lighten the mood with old memories, but Ellie's eyes stayed fixed on the window. She wasn't there for conversation. She was there to finish a chapter. Inside her purse, she carried a thick yellow envelope, filled not with wealth, but with the remains of a lifetime. Across the city, in a small hotel room, Jackson stood in front of a mirror. His reflection frightened him. His eyes were hollow, his hands restless. That morning, he was due at the American Embassy to sign a declaration officially separating him from the shared accounts with his mother, the same accounts he had once drained without guilt. The arrangement was clear. If he signed, he would avoid immediate arrest, but it meant admitting that he had falsified documents and betrayed the person who had loved him most. When he went down to the lobby, Tanya was waiting. She wore a red coat and large sunglasses, her posture polished, but her heart cold. You're late, she said flatly. I didn't know you were coming. Well, surprise. I just came to see how far you can fall. Jackson didn't answer. The pain was no longer from her words. It was from realizing how much of himself he'd given to someone who saw him as disposable. At the embassy, the officials led them into a bright, silent room with metal chairs. The walls smelled of disinfectant and formality. Tanya chewed gum carelessly while Jackson's hands trembled. Then the door opened. Ellie entered slowly, wearing a gray sweater and a dark skirt. Her hair, thin from treatment, was wrapped neatly under a black scarf. She carried the yellow envelope close to her chest. The room went still. Jackson rose instinctively. What are you doing here? He whispered. I came to watch you sign, she said calmly. Not as your mother, as a witness. Tanya laughed under her breath. How touching. The old lady wants her final scene. Ellie looked at her, not with anger, but with deep pity. You took everything he had, Ellie said quietly. But I taught him something you'll never have, Grace. Tanya smirked. Grace? Your son's a failure. You raised him that way. Ellie's voice didn't rise. No, I raised a good boy. He lost himself when he tried to live someone else's dream. Jackson's eyes filled. Mom, I don't know when I changed. Ellie stepped closer and handed him the envelope. Inside are your first photos, your letters to Santa, the drawing you made when you wanted your first bike. You earned it, remember? I kept every promise, son. His hand shook as he took the envelope. She continued softly. And inside is a letter, not to save you, but so you'll never say no one warned you. When the official entered, the process was brief. Jackson signed. Cameras weren't supposed to be allowed, but a tourist waiting nearby captured a short clip. Ellie's trembling voice saying, You were my life, but I was never yours. Today, I understand. You weren't born to love me. You were born to show me the truth. By evening, the video had traveled across social media. People everywhere were moved. Comments poured in. That mother is a queen. That's how you teach without hate. Dignity never grows old. Jackson couldn't raise his head. Tanya was already gone. She didn't say goodbye. She left the building the same way she had entered his life, suddenly and without care. Afterward, Ellie and Jackson walked side by side down a quiet Roman street. When they reached the corner, she stopped. This is where we part ways, she said. Mom, his voice broke. Will you ever forgive me? I already have, she whispered. The question is, will you forgive yourself? Can I do anything for you? Yes, she said gently. Life better make it count. She turned away, walking into the soft afternoon light. Jackson didn't follow. He just stood, watching her fade into the crowd, knowing he would never see her again. That night, he opened the envelope. Inside were faded photos and the lavender-scented letter. When he finished reading, he fell to his knees and cried, not out of anger, but from the weight of realization. He had lost the one person who had never stopped believing in him. When he returned to the U.S., there were no cameras, no greetings, no friends waiting. The world had already moved on. The only thing he carried was the yellow envelope. Everything else, his pride, his image, his comfort, was gone. Back home, Ellie had returned to her small house, cracked walls, a rocking chair that sang softly with every sway. She lived quietly, surrounded by neighbors who brought her soup and stories. To the children, she became a legend. Some said she'd gone overseas to punish the wicked. Others said she was a hero. Ellie smiled but said nothing. The illness progressed, but she never let it defeat her spirit. Each morning she would sit by the window, watching the children play, offering candy, listening to their tales. Her laughter was soft, her peace unshakable. One Sunday morning, Jackson came. He didn't dare knock. He stood across the street, watching her in her chair, wrapped in her shawl, smiling at the little ones who brought her flowers. He left a bag of donuts on her porch and walked away. She felt his presence, but didn't turn. Week after week, he returned, leaving flowers, pastries, little notes without a name. He never spoke. He didn't have to. One evening, Ellie opened her red notebook and wrote her final message. My son, love is not demanded, it is given. If you've learned that, you are not lost. Don't look for me when I'm gone. You'll find me in every kind act, in every time you choose truth over comfort. If one day you see your mother in the eyes of another woman, don't fail her. That will be my peace. She signed her name, sealed the note, and wrote in neat letters, for Jackson. The morning she left the world, sunlight filled the room. On her lap lay the red notebook, the envelope, and a handmade blanket. Her face was serene, untouched by pain, the calm after every storm. Walter arrived first, closed her eyes gently, and whispered, Rest now, Ellie. You've done enough. The neighbors gathered, preparing a humble farewell filled with flowers from the park, children's drawings, and the soft blues music she loved. Jackson arrived later. He walked in quietly, touched her cold hands, and read the final letter. He cried, not loudly, but in silence, the way she used to. In the corner, he found a photo of himself as a child. On the back, she had written, I still believe in you, son. He pressed it to his chest, then sat in her chair, staring at the sky. He knew he had lost his mother, but maybe, just maybe, he had found his soul again. Days later, neighbors said the man with donuts now lived there alone. No luxuries, no guests, just a chair, a red notebook, and a framed photo. Some spaces are left empty when someone leaves. Others are filled with memory and redemption. Did you like this story? And where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments below. If Ellie's story touched your heart, you can show your support with a super thanks so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. Thank you for your kindness and for always being here. Now on your screen, you'll find 2 more life stories that I truly recommend, both filled with lessons and love. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one with love, respect, and heart.